Hi, Ben Kingsbury here. Just here with a message for our landlords at Harcourts Kingsbury, and thought we'd take the opportunity to have a bit of a chat and give a bit of a rundown of where we're at in the office at the moment, what we're doing, maybe have a bit of a chat about some of the things that might be stressing yourselves as landlords as we move through a fairly uncertain time. Look, the first thing to say is Townsville in recent months has been quite strong. Coming out the back end of the flood, we've seen some decent rental growth generally, not in all properties. Low vacancy rates and pretty quick turnover between tenants, that sort of thing. It is disappointing, obviously, and worrisome for the world in general to be moving through something like this. But certainly, at least we're coming from a position where things aren't too bad. So there was a few things we wanted to touch on. Obviously, we're getting quite a few questions about what happens if my tenant loses their job and can't pay rent. You may have seen an email communication from me in the last sort of few days, late last week, talking about landlord insurance. Look, our advice really solidly, while we can't give insurance advice specifically, is landlord insurance is generally pretty good value for money in our experience. There's a policy we put in there that it's $349. It's a Terry share policy for those of you that want to go and have a look at it yourselves. And certainly if it's placed through our office, you get 15 months of cover for the price of 12. While we can't make any guarantees, again, one of the things that we've been told when we have investigated is essentially if your tenant was to lose their job because of the coronavirus economic downturn, then that policy would then apply. If your tenant goes into hardship, the insured event is that your tenant has lost their job. It's not that the coronavirus has specifically impacted them. So generally speaking, our advice has been that would be covered. Obviously, get onto Terry Share, have a look at the landlord policy, familiarise yourself with it and contact them if you have any specific questions. Other scenarios like your tenant getting sick and having coronavirus and not being able to pay their rent because they're off sick, those sort of things, as per normal policies, we've been told just wouldn't be covered. But certainly something that we think is worthwhile. Does not have to be with Terry Share. There's plenty of good providers out there. I know plenty of people have got their landlord insurance through their main insurer as well. Just following up, making sure you've got coverage for loss of rent and all of that sort of stuff. Within the office, we have had to make a few changes, obviously, basically trying to make sure that we can operate as close to business as usual as possible. So some of those changes we've made is we've no longer got teams on the road doing routine inspections. We're no longer doing inspections of properties that are becoming vacant. So if you've got a tenant in there, they're about to move out, we are just waiting until that tenant has actually left before we go in there and show new prospective tenants the property. Trying to be really conscious of our own social responsibility to make sure that we don't become more part of the problem. Obviously some very strict lockdowns happening at the moment. You know, we've had a lot of businesses that have had to close. There's a lot of issues we're expecting to deal with all sorts of stress over coming time. There will be an announcement tomorrow also from the Queensland government. As we understand it, Scott Morrison has basically directed all of the state heads to get together and come up with ways to, in his words, protect tenants during this economic downturn. And look, the short story is we don't know what that looks like. Obviously, we've just seen a fairly major shutdown of a lot of businesses, hotels, cafes, restaurants, all those sort of things, and that is going to have an impact on our tenants. So we are expecting that the stress from those guys is going to increase. We're also expecting an announcement from the Queensland government tomorrow that will, in the words of Scott Morrison, work towards protecting tenants. We're very unclear at the moment whether that is representing a situation where landlords are basically asked to shoulder the burden, or what we're hoping to see is that the Queensland government gets together with the heads of all the other governments in Australia and they come up with a way to support those tenants that are struggling so that can then be supported to the tenants and passed through to yourselves as landlords and everybody else in the system. So we'll just have to wait and see what that looks like. There's not a lot we can do about it. It's an unfortunate time of uncertainty, but we really appreciate your patience as we work through this time, and we're confident that with Townsville's underpinning economy being very strong, as we do work through this, we're going to see a return to positivity again. So thank you very much. We'll be in touch again in the next few days as soon as we have more information that we think is useful to yourselves, and yeah, thank you.